Hello, Clean Waterway friends. Welcome to You Sank My Goo. First, thank you, Cassie, Kayla, and Carrie for coordinating this virtual conference session. Virtual meetings, electronic presentations, and other technology have been forced on us in this unprecedented time. And I am honored that Clean Waterways is chosen me and these case studies for this electronic and recorded presentation. Thank you, Clean Waterways. You Sank My Goo is 3 case studies of emergency responses that are different, not our normal diesel on a waterway. What do you do with soluble liquids that are released? How do you chase it? How do you manage it? What do you do with mud? 200 gallons of mud? A million gallons of mud? Kurt and David are going to share their responses, and we hope you find these case studies interesting and that it may help you in the future. Our first speaker is Ohio EPA On-Scene Coordinator, Kurt Kohler. Kurt is our most experienced on-scene coordinator in Ohio, and he has a wealth of knowledge on any and all things environmental. He has 28 years of experience with the Ohio EPA and over 33 years in the environmental field. And he might be our best OSC ever in Ohio, but don't tell him that. You can read Kurt's full bio on the Clean Waterway replay portal. Okay, Cassie, you can turn Kurt's sound on, but it looks like he heard me. You promised me you would turn his sound off. I hope you enjoy Kurt's presentation. Kurt?
Hi, everybody. And that was very flattering. I do tell myself that every day, but what could you do? Welcome, everybody. I've been asked to talk about inadvertent returns and as they are associated with the HDDs, the horizontal directional drilling projects. Go ahead next. As Jody said, I'm with the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency's Emergency Response Unit. I'm out of the Northeast District Office here in Ohio. In Ohio, the emergency response is broken up into 4 geographic areas across the state. We have an OSC working 24/7, 365, always on call, with the support of 12 other OSCs throughout the state. Again, next. What I want to talk about is, again, pipeline installation. What you're seeing on the screen, not to bore everybody who's familiar with it, but not everybody is as up to knowledge on how things go in. When they're laying pipelines, different utilities, different sizes, anywhere from sometimes a 6-inch pipeline all the way out to the big 36-inch and 42 and 48-inch pipelines. Open cut is the preferred method. That is where you dig a trench, lower the pipe in, bury it, and things are good. Next. HDD is the horizontal directional drilling. And to understand the basics of HDD and how it occurs, this is a simple diagram of what is a directional boring. What it is when you have some sort of obstacle, man-made, natural, a river, a railroad, a highway, something where open cut is not practical or feasible. And what the company will try to do is basically bore underneath that at depth. Sometimes it could go through in a single bore, cut a hole 12 inches wide, pull the 6-inch pipe through, and things are good. But in other instances, when they're pulling through a large diameter pipe, a 42-inch or bigger, it'll have to they'll drill a pilot hole. It might be an 8-inch or 10-inch hole, and then they'll just keep going back and forth, each time successfully enlarging the hole using what's called a reamer bit. Now the process is fairly simple, fairly straightforward. Where the IRs come into is during the course of cutting that borehole, drilling fluids, which is typically water with a bentonite slurry mixed into it, is pushed through the pipe, to the cutting head, and then that material returns back to the surface where it is reclaimed, recycled. So that's how it goes. Go ahead, next slide. When you're doing an HDD, as you can see the yellow area in this case, there's the distance. We're at the one end. The HDD in this case is traveling almost 5,000 feet to the output side, and they're undergoing, in this case, they're avoiding 3 different obstacles in the one directional borehole. So sometimes they are expansive. Other times, again, they just go underneath a 4-lane highway. So go ahead, next slide. This is what the brains and bronze of the operation looks like. The machine on the right is the directional drill, and the little box on the left is the control house. That's the brains of the operation where the operator go ahead and works. Next slide, please. When the boreholes push through, that's kind of what you're looking at. The pit is the return pit. The borehole, in this case, the shadowing, I apologize, should have used a better slide. This is almost now a 42-inch hole cut. As the bit spins, goes down, they are complete control of it. The mud would be returning to that pit for reclamation. And it is a pretty expansive operation when you're doing these large-scale pipelines. Go ahead, next slide. These are just some examples of reamer bits, and by far these aren't the smallest ones. The one on the right is a 30-inch all the way out to the 54, and they do get bigger than that. Again, you're talking big equipment when you're doing this type of work. Go ahead, next slide. And this is the brains of the operation. All the work, this is the controller, simple joystick operation. They make it look easy. It is a complicated task. When they're doing this type of work, they know exactly where they're at anytime with the drill head and where they're going to be positioned in that borehole. Go ahead, next slide. Now this is where you're starting getting into IRs. These are the different, again, gauges that they're watching. But if you look at that middle gauge, the mud pressure, typically they could be operating in the range of 600, 800 PSI when they're pushing mud through the pipe and then getting the return. An IR, an inadvertent return, begins when that mud no longer is coming back to that open borehole. It could be being lost into formation. It could be hit a void space. They hit old mine shafts. Something goes on, but what the first indicator is, they will have a partial or complete loss in that mud pressure, and that is supposed to go ahead and kick some of their contingency actions in place. And I'll discuss that in a little bit greater detail down the road here in this presentation. Next slide, please. One of the things that they have to do is, as they're drilling the borehole, sometimes, again, done in days, sometimes it takes weeks, even months. The pipeline that is going to be pulled through that is already fabricated in place and just waiting to go ahead and be connected and pulled through that borehole when it's all said and done. So let's get into the brains, the basis of what we're here to talk about. Inadvertent returns. Next slide. An inadvertent return is just, as I said a little bit ago, the mud used in the drilling process comes up somewhere where it wasn't supposed to happen. In this picture, these are your common everyday IRs. The mud popped up in the wetland area, a small amount, 30, 50 gallons, easily contained with hay bales, using either vac trucks or heavy duty pumps. They could collect that mud. Easily controlled, but yet still a problem, still something they didn't want to occur. A lot of times what happens when they do get an IR, the indication at first is the loss of pressure. They start sending crews out to find out, are they having a release at some point in time? They will shut down the drilling operations typically. And that in and of itself give it time. Well, a lot of times that the hole where the flow path is coming from will seal itself. If that doesn't happen, they can and will add additives to the drilling fluid to help plug it. Sometimes fibers, other thickeners, just to make that stuff so we can plug the formation, whatever is causing that release, and move on. Go ahead, next slide. Again, sometimes they can't control where the IR is going to occur. This time is right in the creek bed itself, one of the obstacles that they are trying to avoid. The indication is, as you can see, the mud's coming up. It doesn't, the first indication, it might be muddy water along the bottom. It might take a day or two before it's seen. That's where close observation is needed during this process. And again, monitoring that mud pressure and seeing what's going on. One of the things that they found out, and over the course of time and working with them, is the breakouts tend to occur a little bit further off the center line, the drill pathway in the beginning, and then they work them way, if it's a repeat of IR on the same, they tend to work themselves in closer to the center point of the drill line. It's just something, as the formation fills with this mud, it's a preferential flow pathway. Next slide. What you see here is that release from the other side. Pretty simple. Sandbag it out. They're prepared. Dam off the creek. Able to collect and control the mud. And they just, with the simple pump around using trash pumps, the water, was able to be diverted around the dam. And everything is pretty much status quo with very, very limited disruption. Next slide. Same thing here. IR occurred, hillside breakout, again, very common. Go ahead and put up your hay bales, have an inventory of them on supply, on hand when you're doing these types of projects, and it could be collected and contained relatively easy. Next slide. Example of one where, again, the breakout was in a little bit more of a rapid flowing stream, again, with the concept, the water separation, the mud is staying on the bottom, basically building an overflow dam using the hay bales and silt fence, able to control most of it. It's not always perfect. We just try to do our best to minimize the overall extent of impact to the waterway, with the anticipation this could be a short-term, small duration IR. Next slide. Same thing here, only this creek, a little bit more flashier flow. Several different outbreaks occurred. And, like anything else in the emergency response or environmental world, MacGyver tends to be a lot of our heroes. You got to make things do a little bit different things than what they were originally intended to. In this case, using the concrete culvert pipes, setting over the spot at where the IR occurs. Number one, it's easy containment, good access, and that heavy concrete's able to withstand the flow of water under the high flow rates. If it's shown in the next slide, please. If you look, again, same thing, concrete pipes. These IRs were persistent. Run the bridge out. That hose is basically a vacuum recovery hose. And then you had the mobile storage tank that's able to collect that material as it comes out to the surface. So with this, these are your run-of-the-mill daily expected IRs. They happen. You may lose, again, 50 gallons. You may lose a couple thousand gallons. Typically, they're easy to control once they're noted. A lot of times they plug themselves up and easy to clean up. But what I'm going to talk about, and not bore you with what's typical, we're going to get into something a little bit different. Go ahead, next slide. This is, as I'm calling for the presentation, the mother of inadvertent returns. Next slide. Ohio has had a tremendous growth in our natural gas production with the drilling formations. And one of the problems was, as they're putting these wells in, they didn't have the highway network to get the pipeline, the natural gas to market. So we have seen a massive undertaking of work, different pipelines being installed across Ohio, interstate, going into the other states to help, again, transport that natural gas and other products to where the market needs them. In this case, it was an approximate $44.2 billion, 713-mile dual, side-by-side, 42-inch natural gas pipelines being installed. And it's amazing that they transport that amount of gas, 3.25 billion cubic feet per day, from gas that came out of the wells here in Ohio. Go ahead. That's just a kind of quick, simple diagram of where that pipeline was going, just for point of reference. But as part of, go ahead, next slide. Under the emergency response here in Ohio, we get notified. As I said earlier, one of us is on call 24/7. And on this particular day, I was the one on call. Calls come in from companies, fire departments, emergency management agencies, whoever would notify us to need our help. And in this case, we got a notification from a drilling company of an inadvertent return down in the bottom of Stark County, still up here in Northeast Ohio, along the Tuscarawas River, basically telling us of an IR. At this point in time, IRs were almost a daily occurrence for us. There were 3 or 4 active pipelines going in, a lot of small-scale trunk lines. So nothing to get too worried about. And even with the initial notification, there was nothing outstanding on this one to make it any different other than let's go out, get the back truck, get the hay bales. Go ahead, next slide. Well, upon arrival there, what we found is, again, the typical wetland areas that they were trying to avoid with this HDD process. And this is an image of a wetland area, how it would look, good diversity. This was a high quality class 3 wetland, good species diversity, good habitat. It was a floodplain area along the Tuscarawas River. Just a beautiful, beautiful area, just waiting for a nice IR to happen. Go ahead, next slide. When we entered the area of the IR, this is what I faced. Go ahead, next slide. Just mud everywhere, covering acres and acres of the wetland, knee deep in areas. As you moved into it, it got deeper and thicker. Go ahead, next slide. And it just continued. One of the things, go ahead, next slide. One of the things over the course of my experience with emergency response, you kind of can do a quick scene size up and start running through your brain what your next step is going to be, being 2 steps ahead on now what to fix, what containment, what actions you're going to take to fix it. Go ahead, next slide. When I was walking through this one, my mind became almost numb, working with it, looking at the other people. It's what are we going to even do to fix this one? And kind of to capture, go ahead, next slide. Some of what I was seeing, the video, picture's worth 1,000 words. I'll be quiet for a moment and show you a video of what we were looking at when I arrived on scene. Go ahead. That's just mud. You remember the first picture, nice green, the area. I was in the southeast corner. I was even in the thick of it. Now here is your mud. And that kind of I don't think that is what the wetland folks consider the hydroponic soils that they use to categorize wetlands and all that. Go ahead and go to this next slide. Here we go. One of the things when you're looking at all that mud, now we're in an isolated area. The blue circle is the area where the IR occurred. And part of the process is it was a remote area. They were crossing from left to right. During these processes, and I kind of touched on earlier, when an IR begins, when they lose pressure, they are supposed to implement their response procedure, contingency procedures. They're supposed to also do daily walkovers through the area, through the center line of the drill, just checking, just to make sure everything's going well. There was a lot of questions of already, like, how could something like this have occurred basically overnight? It just didn't make sense. It didn't line up. On this process, they were drilling, they were installing these 42-inch lines. They were on the 48-inch drill hole. Flow rates were about 3,000 gallons a minute at about 800 PSI when they're pushing the water through. We are estimating in the ballpark of 3 million to 6 million gallons of mud over about a 6-acre area. And out in the western edge of it, it was all in water, below water level, about 2 feet underwater, with again a big buildup of mud. So this faced a challenge. One of the first things we also did is, you have federal oversight of this. The FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, has the say on these types of projects. So they had to be brought in right away to say, we have a problem, and what are we going to be doing to fix it? First thing was, well, as you can see, we can't access this. It's a wetland. It's nature's garbage disposal. No action was proposed, and that really didn't fly very long at all. There was a recognition the mud had to go. Go ahead, next slide. The company did embrace, their responsibilities for cleaning up. As I kind of said, they had a long way to get in off the road to get to the area to bring in the equipment they were going to need to have to start the fix. That meant building roads. They had to get access through private landowners, and they did so. They went door to door with the people impacted, basically checkbook in hand, and said, we need access. Can we have it? And they, go ahead, next slide. And they built a road back to the area where the IR occurred so we could start with the cleanup. That took a couple days, even planning and construction. They knew they were in for the long haul. Part of this process and the anticipation of this was they still had another whole pipeline to do. Plus, they had to continue this one. They were only about halfway through the borehole. They had to take a borehole for this one out to 60 inches. So they had a couple more passes and a lot of mud to push through the hole yet. So they built a road with the anticipation of they were going to be in it for the long haul. Go ahead, next slide. Now, we were dealing with mud. And one of the things we did, it was heavy labor, and my hats were off to the crews that worked. There was nothing easy about this cleanup, from moving sandbags and wallows to dragging hoses and vacs and all that, and just pushing mud to pickup points. One of the things we did right away is brought in emergency response. Has the ability to bring in subject matter experts, folks from our other divisions who can help us and provide guidance with what do we need to do next. Anything from waste management to air pollution to, in this case, our division of surface water, our wetland biologists, our wetland specialists. We also notified U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service so they could have a say in this matter. Our surface water people quickly agreed that this being the high quality class 3 wetland it was, that the damage from the amount of mud just laying there that would continue to resuspend and redeposit, we had to do something. So activity, even though it would be intrusive and destroy a lot, in the long run, it was better for restoration of the wetland than the no action or limited action. It wasn't a clearance. Everyone agreed to go in with excavators and bulldozers and start clearing everything we can. So again, we came up with a process, some of it trial and error, to make this situation, which was bad, into a much better situation. Next slide. So what the plan was is we had access to unlimited water supply. We had the Tuscarawas River running adjacent to the whole impacted area. So by using the trash pumps, we were able to use high volume amounts of water under low pressure, basically using 1.5 and 2-inch lines, and basically suspend the mud. And then using both vac trucks brought in or high volume hydraulic pumps, pump heads, we moved the mud to these collection things. Where the nice thing is the facility was able to basically reclaim a lot of this material, the water and mud needed for the HDD to continue. So it was brought back up to the drill rig, put through the reclaimer, get out the solids, and then the majority of it was reused. So we almost had a closed loop system going. Go ahead, next slide. Again, my hat's off. There was nothing fun. There was slip, trips, and fall hazards left and right. There was mosquitoes who wanted to help carry you away. Too bad they didn't take any of the mud with them. It was actually even a joke. There was a bunch of different little crews that worked together, and the unspoken word was if you did a face plant in the mud, you had to buy your crew pizza dinner that night. And believe me, there were many pizzas bought for the different crews. And I won't admit to my falling once or twice as well. It was hard work. Next slide. Again, just another image. What they ended up doing as they did, we identified sections and staked things off, turned crews loose, and worked on those areas, doing a once through the entire area once, doing the gross cleanup, the big pocket mud removal, big bang for your buck kind of thing. And then with the idea of coming back under a phase 2, phase 3, and keep, again, attacking the hotspot areas, the areas that still held, high volumes of mud, just to make a systematic approach to this. And it worked well. It really did. Go ahead. Next slide. It's just a quick video again of just showing and capturing some of this work underway. Midway through the process, phase 1's already been done. You're starting to see some of the underlying dirt. The crews are just pulling the mud to the pickup head, and you got a guy getting debris out of the way just to keep it moving. Day in, day out for over a month on that part. Very good. Thank you. Next slide. This and aerial image drones are a huge part of our work anymore these days, and this became very helpful. Aerial photo, and you could see the path on the left, the very bottom left corner is a bike trail on the wrong side of the river, of course, to allow access. But the area you can see that's kind of just grayed out and has no vegetation extending all the way up to that black line, which is a steep cliff bluff. That's as far out as that mud extended. And then again, there was still discoloration in the water all the way out into that floodplain. But the buildup of mud is what's targeted. And go ahead and go to that next slide. And that's kind of the area of impact. And what we did by making those grids and sectors, we were able to do daily accounting for the areas of how clean was clean, where things were staged, who was working and where. It even helped with the safety aspect of what crews were going to be working, for the head count kind of thing. Because again, as we said, it was easy to slip, trip, fall, and disappear in the mud, and nobody would have known the better. So that was kind of the area of concern. Our wetland folks were involved in this thing throughout the process to make sure things were going well. The federal government folks were involved as well. There were a lot of lessons learned, and there was a lot of process improvements discovered that could help make things better. And with that, go ahead, next slide. like anything else we do, be it from tying your shoes to cleaning up 6 million gallon IRs, you can learn from everybody every day. That's one of the beautiful things I've learned over my 28 years in the EPA is you don't know everything. I mean, the vac operator might have a shortcut for how to do something, how to make it a little bit better. It's always a beautiful thing to work with others, learn, and turn those learnings into your next event. In working with the companies, and by this point in time, we had a large involvement from other folks in our agency to address this issue. And one of the things we found a couple areas where we thought could be improved, and that's kind of what I want to go over with everyone now, so you can have something to take home on if you're facing these types of projects in your states. So go ahead, next slide. And these are some best management practices. And again, these were recommended to the companies. These weren't anything we can enforce because we didn't have a say. This is FERC. But there was some recognition of what the failures were. And one of the big things is call the EPA hotline right away. They weren't obligated to do that. Just get things moving. We're here to help, believe it or not. A lot of people don't think that's the case, but we do bring resources to the table. We do bring experience when there's a release to the environment. The other thing is refocus staff and contractors. They're going to happen. It's just a matter of when. It's not always we got to get the line in. We got to get the line in. Push, push, push. See how many feet you get drilled. There's got to be an understanding and, okay, what happens when we do have this IR? One of the biggest complaints we got from the public relations is as these were going on throughout the state, property owners weren't aware that some of their property was being impacted. And we thought that was not good citizenship. And they had no way of finding out any information. If they weren't calling us or calling me on this case, there was the companies were just, they had good separation, and it caused a lot of problems. And even though they're going under like a wetland, there are some that are higher quality, and they might, as we said, have more vigilant monitoring. We'll talk about that. Go ahead, next slide. This thing was huge, pre-stage remediation equipment. Scaled to the job. If you're doing a 6-inch borehole and are going to be pushing 30 gallons of mud under 80 psi, a 2-inch trash pump might be good. If you're pushing 800 psi at 3,000 gallons a minute, a 2-inch trash pump is useless. You're crossing rivers, have a boat ready that's capable of doing surveillance or bringing equipment in, that type of stuff. Have redundancy. 20 hay bales might be adequate for a small scale, but you might be 200 if it's going to be a large scale. You may not need them all on site, but have a resource, identify a local farmer or co-op that could supply the resources that you need at 3 o'clock in the morning type of thing. Have those things set up ahead of time rather than at the time of need. And then the biggest thing is careful monitoring the drilling, recognizing that time is money, yes, but if things happen and go bad, this cleanup was costly. It slowed down their operation. Excuse me. Go ahead, next slide. The other thing is, and they learned, and the company even talked on this one, was the distance underneath from, in this case, below grade is calculated out well ahead of time. And a simple shift of a foot or two is nothing. But if 10 feet or more shift is a lot of engineering has to go into the angle of pitch and all that to get the pipeline to bend and flex in the borehole and come out the right depth. But on this one, they knew right away that the second one, were they going to relocate, were they going to go deeper? And in the end, they went deeper. by a significant amount without any issue. There wasn't one IR reported whatsoever during the installation of that second 42-inch pipeline. So, I mean, mistakes happen. Is it a soft bog? What are the soil depths? They do sometimes do well borings to get that formation information, but sometimes those borings are miles, 5, 6, 10 miles apart. The other thing we found out, a lot of these companies were even out of the West, Texas and all. Our geology, our winters are much different than what they faced in Texas. And that was one of the things a lot of the companies, commented on, is they weren't expecting some of the features and some of the weather conditions that they had up here in good old beautiful sunny Ohio. The other thing, and again, we push drill slower. Less pressure, more time. Yes, but again, it avoids the delays, associated with an IR. That's something, cost effectiveness that has to be taken into consideration. One of the things that was talked here, and that is an IR relief hole. They knew as they finished this hole, they were going to have a continued IRs. And one of the ways that you could basically, on any spill in the beginning, it's controlling you. And your object is to get to a point where you're controlling it. It was evaluated whether or not do they go ahead and drill a borehole from the surface down on top of the HDD, case it off, and give the mud a path to go. After some serious evaluation, they opted not to do that, but that is sometimes very effective operation. And now you basically have a point source discharge for your drilling mud to come out of. So go ahead, next slide. It was amazing too, and this isn't an isolated case. When you're talking to the crew on the field, they really don't even know sometimes what the identified resources that they were targeting were. It's just another wetland or it's just another creek. Yes, but they didn't understand the expanse of it. They didn't know wetlands and waters of the state, what those terms mean. Those were the people, the environmental folks back at the corporate, who designed the plans to do, but the boots in the field just knew to do their job. So sometimes communicating that information and making sure the guys out in the field are well aware of the resources that they're trying to protect by doing the HDD. The other thing we said is increase the frequency of the assessment team. On that one we just talked about, there were a lot of fingers being pointed along the way. And, human nature is path of least resistance. And in this case, there was a couple of things built into it. The companies lease a right of way that, let's just say for discussion purposes, it's 100-foot wide, with the center line being where the borehole. That lease is very legally restrictive. And as they do their assessments, they can't, or at least they can't go out of that right of way, or they're trespassing. Well, in this case, in order to get down into that wetland, you either had to scale an 80-foot high soft cliff and then traverse a chest deep, mucky little bog to get over to that area, or you had to walk 300 feet off the right of way and come down an easy trail. What happened? Well, it sure indicated that that area was just never checked because they didn't have the access to go around to get down to it. Okay, so if you can't walk it, can you fly it? Can drones use that technology now and fly that right away? They can. One of the things that we found is during the course of it, a lot of the protesters actually used drones to monitor it, and it was being beamed out on YouTube and there's other internet-based sites daily as far as a protest tool against energy exploration here in Ohio. But drone technology and flying that is being very commonly used anymore with utility inspections and required. And we found that to be very, very helpful for them to do that and then monitor those IRs as they occurred. The other thing is, just like a stormwater pollution prevention plan, the plans is only good as the people who know it. It shouldn't be printed off, put on a clipboard, and thrown over on the shelf out there. The staff that are there should know what to do. They should know where the equipment that is being staged is at, and they should have training on what to do. That way, if it happens, they're ready to do it. They know, they can kick it in, practice it, almost like a fire drill, especially, again, on the large scale projects. Go ahead. The other things is that we found, and again, this was more coming from our surface water folks and less out of the emergency response phase, is that there were very specific stormwater management issues, timely reclamation and stabilization to prevent that erosion into the waterways. Can areas be dewatered? Potentially. I mean, you don't want to dewater a wetland. We have found on some of the open cuts, the slope breaks really weren't put in, or if they were put in, they were put in improperly and weren't maintained. Sediment fabric quickly fills up with the runoff, and then running basically useless and actually exacerbating the conditions. Effective perimeter controls. Improperly put up sediment fence. You're putting up, in some cases, miles of sediment fence. It's a lot easier just to build, pound it into the ground and laying it on the surface without really trenching it in. So, these were all things that were found to be problems after the fact, that a lot of these companies, when we worked with them, committed to process improvements so that they didn't have this type of incident on their hand. And believe me, word quickly spread throughout the industry of what was going on down in Stark County. Everyone knew about it, and it was highly publicized in local media of what the effects were. So again, negative publicity for a company that really didn't want that. Okay, next slide. In the end, with proper management, IRs are going to happen. And not a matter if, it's a matter of when and where. Being properly prepared, having the equipment on hand, in this case, the large capacity tow behind pumps, everything's controlled. Simple, minimize the effect, minimize your out-of-pocket costs and delays in your project. So again, pre-planning is critical, because failing to prepare is preparing to fail. Okay, last slide. This is a picture of what the wetland looks like now. When the emergency response phase was over, we transitioned this over to our surface water, our wetlands ecologist group, to monitor. The company had committed to doing basically a 5-year plan with ongoing monitoring and a lot of, again, restoration activities of the wetland. I know this slide looks nice, green, luscious growth has returned, but in essence, it might look like a great success, but according to our wetland experts, it's not. It's better than what it was, but there was a lot of things that still have yet to be done. One of the things was they were supposed to install dead trees and branches to help create for habitat. There is a very low diversity of fauna compared to the immediately adjacent unimpacted areas of that wetland. Most of the area where the cleanup occurred is dominated with disturbance tolerant species and invasive species that were not there before. Some of the deeper pools where the mud collected at its worst still has a significant layer of what appeared to be the clay on top of the wetland soil. So there's still work to be done. Monitoring will be done, but in the end, we under the emergency response, we made a bad situation better, and hopefully through progress, things will be restored. Next slide. I want to thank you all for your time. I would rather have much done this better in person, with better interaction with the crowd and allowing for questions. But your time is very valuable. I appreciate it greatly. Here is my contact information. I'll be glad to share with you any of my knowledge I gained from this and the many other IRs I've been on. Feel free to call me. or email or work through the Clean Waterways, and we'll go from there. So again, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Kurt. Wow. I had forgotten how massive that incident was. That was really interesting. Great videos. So much mud. I encourage you to ask Kurt questions through the Clean Waterways replay portal. Thanks again, Kurt. Our second speaker is Indiana Department of Environmental Management On-Scene Coordinator, David Cage. David has been with IDEM for 27 years, and he has 25 years emergency response experience. He has a multitude of responses, and he might be my favorite IDEM OSC. I hope you find David's presentations valuable. David?
Hi, everybody. I'm David Cage. I work for the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. We do the emergency response part of our agency. And on this particular slide, you have my contact information. So please feel free, if you have any questions, to contact me. That is my direct phone number. Today, we will be talking about two incidents that took place in Indiana. One of which is a biocide that was spilled into a stream down in southern Indiana, and the other is going to be the combined sewer system in Indianapolis. Next. So first of all, as I indicated, we had it's portable toilet deodorizer. So it's the things everybody sees when they go to an event inside these portalets, and this incident took place down near Louisville. Next. So this gives a site location. It is slightly northwest of Louisville, and we had a company down there that is a landscaping company, and they moved into the portable toilets business. Pretty lucrative. And we ended up getting a call from the emergency management agency down in that county, requesting our assistance because this material was in Yellow Fork Creek. Next. And this is another site location. So in the top right corner here, you can see the location of where the release occurred, and that roadway that goes down to the left side of the picture, bottom left, that creek follows that road and then goes underneath the roadway, and you can see that it wraps around that little business to the in the bottom left side of the slide. Next. This is the actual facility itself. So it is a landscaping company. The owner lives in that house on the left side of the photo here, and in the center there is a barn, and on the upper part of that is where the incident actually took place. Next. So what we had when we first arrived, we had several people on scene. So we had the Department of Natural Resources, we had Emergency Management Agency, we had the Health Department, Fire Department, Police Department, 2 environmental contractors, lots of equipment already in place, as well as the owners. So this slide is the material that they actually spilled, and what had taken place is they had actually rinsed out one of their tanks, and well, it went down the drain. So this is just the SDS sheet on the product that was released, and in the bottom right-hand corner there, it shows that it is clearly a biocide and will affect the aquatics if it enters surface water. And likewise, the problem we run into with this material is we have it's normally discharged into a wastewater treatment plant, so they have to be very careful in accepting this waste on a regular day. So this is going to be a much dilute form. Next. And this is the bulk container. They come in 250 gallon bulk containers. So this is just one of them that was full, but when there's a little bit of residual in there, that's what the employee rinsed out. Next. And here's exactly where it happened. So he rinsed it out. It went down into that drain right there. And the picture on the right-hand side, they actually had put this drain in recently. So that is not dead grass. It's actually the backfill to the storm sewer that goes over the hill and towards our next slide. Next. And so this is looking back. So this was recently installed. We don't know how recently, but it was recently installed. By the time I got there, they had already, the right picture there shows where they had dug a hole to try and prevent any material from further, or, any more material from entering the stream. So from the picture on the right, it drops down fairly significantly down the side of this, essentially a cliff. And next. And enters Yellow Fork Creek. So this material by design obviously kills things. And what this picture shows here is it actually stripped all the moss off of the rocks as it was coming off of that property. So it is very potent. They often use it in a dilute form. But in this particular case, it was full strength, other than the rinse water the gentleman was using to rinse out this tank. Next. So here, by the time I got there, that previous slide shows where it had entered the stream. This is actually near that location, but by the time I got there, it had stopped. So this is actually fresh water moving down through the stream. But as you can see here, we have several dead fish at this location on both slides, and of course on the right, it's a little murky. Next, and here is the material itself. So a little bit goes quite a long way. We noticed a lot of obviously dead fish in this part of the stream. Crews, we had 8 vac trucks that were working different parts of the stream. And keep in mind, from it's about a half mile from the location down to that first bridge, as you saw in the previous slide, or in one of the previous slides. So this is where we had set up a temporary incident command, and we were emergency management agency, health department, myself, were doing the assessment from point of entry down to where we felt that we needed to obviously see how far this goes. Next. And here we're looking at obviously more dead fish, and I'm going to get into most of the fish were very small, fingerlings, and a lot of minnows. The right picture, the water is starting to get a little clearer, but it still has that blue tinge to it, and that is actually under State Road 150, which I believe is on the next slide. So this gives us a feel. So again, we've got the location of point of entry on the top right of the slide. Those pictures that you just saw go all the way down to that road that goes from the at the bottom side of the picture, bottom left. And so just to give you some perspective. So the next slides are going to show that we ended up finding out that about 1,000 feet downstream from that bridge is where we made our last stand. Next. This is fairly difficult to see, but all those little specks are actually fingerlings. So this was a very, very healthy stream, which I found out later that it has one of the highest it's called an index of biotic integrity, which is a scale system. Let's go to the next slide. And this is what I received from my folks in our targeting monitoring section. These folks go out and assess, they do fish shocking, and they determine what we have, the types of species that are found, and they rate these streams. And in 2010, let me clarify this. This stream, they don't have information on this particular stream, but about 2 or 3 miles downstream from here is Indian Creek. So their work was done in Indian Creek, and all the tributaries that enter are spawning grounds for numerous species of fish. So 2010, they had a index of biotic integrity of 54 out of 60, which, as you can see here, is considered an excellent stream. And on the second bullet point there, third bullet point, it talks about how Purdue was going to reintroduce the hellbender into the stream due to how clean the water was. Next. Fortunately, this is actually taken after our spill. So this is about a year and 3 months later. And it's, again, in Indian Creek, so it's not Yellow Fork Creek where the incident occurred, but it gives a good idea that we still have, the stream did apparently recover. Now, I don't have the document to indicate what the rating was for this particular event. It hadn't been published by the time I put this together, but this gives you a great idea of how many different species are in the receiving stream where Yellow Fork discharges into. Next. And this is another picture that is pretty alarming. So everything that you see is they're about the size of your finger, or the tip of your fingernail, and of course they all perish because of the biocide that was in the material that was spilled. Next. So this dam, we constructed this dam about 1,000 feet, as it says, 1,000 feet south of State Road 150. Didn't see much discoloration downstream from here, and didn't realize that there were live fish throughout the body of water. So we put this dam in place and continued our recovery efforts. You have to pump the water, it has to go for disposal in Kentucky, and then they would, repeat that process. And what I decided at about midnight that night was we still had live fish on the upstream side of this dam. So we stopped the response at that point to see if these guys would recover, and then we would make a determination the following day to see whether or not we would have to remove more water or take the chance of obviously allowing these guys to recover. And actually, what we did the next morning, we did our assessment. We had no dead fish at this area. And, I made a decision that it's like, okay, we're not going to recover any more water at this point. We still had a blue tinge, but these are some of the decisions we have to make on deciding whether or not we remove the dam, remove more water, and we made the decision to go ahead and remove the dam at that point. Next. And again, this is the same shot that you've seen before, and and it gives you the full extent. So we are down in that bottom left side where that dam was located, and so that this is when we decided to open up the dam and see how things went. Next. And this is sort of the last stage of what we needed to do is break the dam, restore the stream flow. And from there, we waited a couple hours, went downstream and to check and make sure that we didn't have any issues going on downstream that we weren't aware of. And we didn't see any abnormal effects downstream. And that was the end of the response. So what we ended up doing is obviously they had to answer some questions. Department of Natural Resources did their fish kill count, which in this particular case, since we had so many fish, they have a formula that they use to determine how many fish are actually perished, and they go over the types. So they had an enforcement action that resulted in a fine from both Department of Natural Resources as well as my agency. Next. So that is it for this presentation. Please feel free to ask any questions, and you can contact me at this phone number here or the email. And what we will be doing now is moving directly into my next presentation, which is going to be the combined sewer system in Indianapolis. This is again my contact information, and here it was a petroleum release. And it was back in last year, September of last year. And next. So this gives you a site location. So it's just inside what we consider the loop, 465, just south of Indianapolis along the White River. Next. And this gives you a better idea of what we're looking at. And our main focus here is going to be on the top right of this slide, where you see that little white dot. That is a sandbar where Pleasant Run comes into White River. And what you're actually looking at on the left side of this slide is the wastewater treatment plant for one of the wastewater treatment plants for Indianapolis. Next. So really quickly, in Indianapolis, we have it's Citizens Energy Group. And Citizens Energy Group runs our wastewater treatment plant as well as our drinking water system. So what they're tasked with is obviously the collection system as well as the treatment plants, the drinking water plants, and anybody that discharges into those systems. I'm going to refer back to the slide often. You can see where combined sewer overflow 117 is in the center of the map. And then Pleasant Run is a creek that comes in south of there. And that little island or the sandbar that you see to the left of Pleasant Run, that is going to be our main focus for this presentation. Next. So we received a call from a private citizen, and 2 days prior to him calling us, he indicated that he saw oil in the river, which isn't uncommon. And we said, okay, so we'll go check it out, thinking that nothing would be there because obviously it's 2 days after the event. Our protocol in Indiana, at least in Marion County, is to contact the Marion County Public Health Department. They have hazmat specialists that do similar. They do exactly what we do, but at a local level. So we work a lot with these folks. We're always in communication. So I contacted my folks over there. And I said, well, let's go see what's going on. So they arrived first, and it's hard to see in this picture, but there is oil blanketing this whole area around the shoreline. And when I arrived, that's my truck in the back. They were busy trying to obviously clean up what they could, and quickly realized that this was bigger than what they would be able to handle. Next. So we started doing some research and working our way back up the bank to go, okay, well, where is this coming from? And I came across this structure right here, which happens to be the combined sewer overflow 117. And next. And then we look down at the spillway, and this is what we saw. So obviously there was a large event that happened. It came out of the combined sewer system into the river, and that's all we knew at the time. Next. So this is a few other shots, the same area, and it's concerning. You know, one of the concerns on this picture is you can see a line in the left side of the picture that clearly indicates this wasn't the first time this has happened, or there's been another discharge, because you've got clean rock and you've got that smudge line on the left hand side. So our protocol here is Citizens Energy. We contacted them and said, "Hey, we've got an issue going on the White River. This is our location," and of course, they send their folks out to begin assessing what's going on with us. And what I want to make abundantly clear here is obviously Citizens Energy didn't put it in the system, and they're at the mercy of the industrial folks and anybody that discharges to Indianapolis. So what they do is, first of all, they're going to start a response. So they're going to initiate that response, hire contractors that are needed to obviously address what we need to do, and then we'll work together to figure out what the next steps are as far as the response. Now, behind the scenes, Citizens Energy was working with my agency to obviously determine who was responsible for this. So Citizens sends out their inspectors through the system to pay visits to industries and people that companies that may have this type of material that would be would be able to discharge this amount of oil. Next. Another shot. It was very thick oil. The splash pool was obviously full of oil, as you can see in the bottom right corner. Everything was covered in a thick layer of petroleum-based something. You couldn't tell if it was diesel, motor oil. It seemed to be a mix of the above, but you can clearly see here the line where it had happened before. And actually, this gets a little bit worse as we move through the slides. So next. This is a shot from the top where they have the combined sewer overflow structure. And I'm going to get into a little bit of what Citizens has been doing, the initiative to eliminate combined sewer overflows in the county. And of course, we've got that going in other large cities as well as nationwide to eliminate sewage from entering streams and rivers. So here we have, the initial response. We had Citizens hired a company to come in. We've got a vac truck ready to go. We've got a game plan as to how we're going to address what's in the creek and obviously prevent any more from moving downstream. Next. So the initial stabilization was, as you see, we've got absorbent booms trying to keep any floatables from leaving this area, and then we went ahead and reinforced that with a skirt boom. So that orange boom that's behind has a 12-inch skirt that goes down into the water body to try and prevent anything from rolling underneath it. So that was the first step of this process to clean it up. Next. So this is where it gets a little more concerning. So that initial picture that I showed you with the sandbar in front of Pleasant Run, there were tar balls scattered all over that little sandbar on both sides, on the north, upstream, downstream. But that's where we first started. One of the things we did during this day, which was day 2, was I had some other folks from my department, emergency response guys, as well as folks from Citizens Energy, and we did a initial shoreline assessment. So we sent those folks downstream on both sides to see how far we were going to have to respond and obviously remove any contamination that we found. Unfortunately, it did not go much beyond what were that little sandbar at the end of Pleasant Run. So this was manual labor of actually picking up tar balls all around that sandy area and physically removing by hand all the tar and petroleum that they could find. Now the right picture here is a little more telling. So the first picture I showed you, where it had that line on the side of the riprap, is actually way below where we're seeing here. And if you look really closely on the right picture, up the tree, you can see two lines, distinct lines, not the angled tree, but the tree behind it. That is 13 feet off of the current water height. So there's one of two theories here. It was either a one-time event where material was still trapped in the sewer system, and every time it rained and the level rose, it spit out a little more of this oil, or we have about 8, 9 different incidents that have happened over time, and that's what was left behind, is obviously these lines on the trees. Next. So once we drain the pool, and this will be a good time to talk about the combined sewer system. Citizens Energy has started a project called the Deep Rock Tunnel. They started this project back in 2011, and this is a tunnel system that is able to cope with combined sewer overflows. So normally you've got an aging infrastructure, you've got a 100-year-old system, and the sewer can take so much. And when it reaches that point that it can't, then it's diverted to the rivers and streams. So the idea is this Deep Rock Tunnel is a series of tunnels, 18-foot tunnels underground through Indianapolis, where any overflow is able to be diverted down to the system, and then slowly after the rain events, then they can pump it up to the treatment plant and process that water. And this is actually one of the spots where they have part of that tunnel, but it was not online at the time. So unfortunately, this was still, we still had overflow into the river. What we did have, the Deep Rock Tunnel, it started in 2011. It is planned to be done about 2025, although they may be done a little sooner than that. The system, when it's completely online, is going to be able to handle at least 270 million gallons in a single event. So all that would have, previously gone to the river. So we're fortunate to have that system being built as we speak. And these pictures just show the extent of how much oil had, and it wasn't just because we drained the pool and the bathtub effect. This was covered on the rocks long before the water was removed. Next. So this is looking back. If you remember the first slide, my truck was sitting on the bank, and we were on that little sandbar at the end of Pleasant Run, and this is actually looking back along the left descending bank. Yes, left descending bank, back towards the combined sewer overflow. So when we first got there, you start trekking down along the side here and seeing what until you find where it's coming from. So that's just a shot of that area. We've also got, I believe, in this area, we've got some booms set up just to prevent anything from floating out into the river and getting away from us. Next. So again, this is showing that. So just as a reminder, you've got Pleasant Run right there at the bottom center of the picture. On the left-hand side, you can see that sandbar and that whole little area. We had to go both on the upstream side, which is to the right, and then the downstream side wrapped all the way around there. That's where we were doing the manual recovery of tar balls. So everything from Pleasant Run back up to the CSO, we ended up putting up hard boom on the outside, and then putting absorbent boom on the inside, just to make sure that during our response activities we didn't release any oil, at least floatables, into the water body and have to go chase it downstream. Next. Again, our recovery efforts. So at this time, we were able to, this pump was set up. So originally we had the vac truck here, but this pump was set up. So we were keeping that the splash pool drained down, and that was actually being pumped to the treatment plant They were able to handle that after their folks took a look at the analysis, sample analysis. They were able to handle that material. And what you see on the right picture there is a medium-sized excavator. We were trying to determine how are we going to. It was probably about 20 feet down to that water from where that excavator is standing. And we were trying to find best way to sort of handle how are we going to get a hold of this petroleum material down there. So we came up with the idea. Obviously, we needed to bring in a lot of stone and actually build a ramp, and then bring in a larger piece of equipment to address that. Next. And this is that piece of equipment. So the long arm excavator, once we built the pad out, he was able to reach down, grab all the contaminated stone, and he would spin around and put that in roll-off boxes. So the other option was we were talking about possibly power washing and recovering all the rinsate. That was just, or manually removing those stones. It was just too big of a task. So this was, we broke it up, or I broke it up into 3 areas. We had the main area right around the combined sewer. We had the second area that went from the combined sewer down to Pleasant Run. And then, of course, Pleasant Run and that sandbar was our third area. So by the time we were working on this, we had pretty much completed the cleanup efforts, which was about a week later. Cleanup efforts on the shoreline at the sandbar, but we still had the work to do at this spot, and also from here downstream to Pleasant Run. Next. And this is just another shot. So he would dip down, grab all those stones, and then spin around, put them in. I actually think he was putting them into a skid steer, and then that skid steer would come out here and put it into lined roll-off boxes. Next. And this is a few pictures. So before and after. Obviously the left side is what we saw when we got there. The right side is with brand new stone. It is dark down there, but that's just, it's new stone. There's uncontaminated. The thing of the bottom picture, or the right bottom picture, is just newer stone. So that is the splash pool. We still have our containment in place just in case. So that's going to be the last thing that we would remove. Next. And this is working from that last slide downstream to the sandbar. One of the issues that we were getting into was, okay, well, there are trees. So this was heavily overgrown. You could barely get up there when we first started. So one thought was, well, take out all the trees. And then we decided, no, we don't take out all the trees. You can take out some trees. So this is what we were left with. So we had that medium excavator walk down through this area, manually scoop, or mechanically scoop up everything, and then transfer that to our roll-off boxes and dispose of that accordingly. Next. And this is what we this is a clear shot of where we were to begin with at CSO 117, looking downstream towards our Pleasant Run. So when all this work was taking place, we were making sure that, you know, nothing left those rocks, or, you know, we didn't disturb anything that would push oil into the river and then have to go chase it later. Next. And this is the before and after. It's obviously on the right-hand side, you can see those lines in the tree, and on the left-hand side, you can see it slightly different perspective. But we were fairly successful in obviously removing all that contamination down through there. It wasn't 100%, but we were obviously restricted by the steepness of the bank, and you know, we didn't want to make more damage cleaning everything up. Next. So that is the end of my second presentation. Again, please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And Jody, back to you.
Thanks, David. That was a great presentation. Thanks for sharing your experience with us. I didn't realize that Indianapolis had such an intricate stormwater management system. The Deep Rock Tunnel. Very interesting. I'd like to see that. And just like I said for Kurt, if you have questions for David, you can contact him through the Clean Waterways Replay portal. And that's it for our presentations. Thank you for watching, and thank you Clean Waterways for coordinating, recording, and providing the platform for David and Kurt's presentations. You can ask David and Kurt questions by using the Clean Waterways Replay portal. Thanks so much for watching, and stay healthy, Clean Waterways, friends, and family.